John was incredulous as he gazed at the chart, feeling a deep sense of disappointment washing over him. He wasn't oblivious. He understood the implications all too well. Despite years of dedicated effort for his wife, he now faced the bitter reality of her betrayal. Wiping away his tears, John pondered over the events of the past months, wondering what had transpired during his absence. He was on the brink of uncovering the painful truth. As John arrived at the hospital that evening, anticipation surged within him. This was the moment he had longed for, the pinnacle of his dreams, becoming a father. Despite the excitement, a hint of nervousness fluttered in his stomach as he traversed the corridors, wondering why. This should have been one of the most joyous occasions of his life. Upon reaching the appropriate ward, he proceeded towards the reception counter. Nurses were clustered nearby, their faces lit up with smiles, indicating a pleasant atmosphere. However, a wave of apprehension churned in John's stomach as he neared. Despite his attempt to dispel the nervousness, it lingered as he addressed the nurse. "I'm here to visit Nadine Adams. I'm her husband, and she's in labor with our child," he informed the woman, sporting a proud grin. The nurse's smile faded as she glanced at the papers on her desk. "Mrs. Nadine Adams? Are you the father?" Her tone was tinged with confusion, replacing her previous expression with a frown. John was surprised by her question, but affirmed it with a nod. However, her next words sent his thoughts into a whirlwind. "Excuse me, sir." She glanced at her papers. "I'm sorry, but I can't permit you entry." "Another individual is currently with your wife," the woman stated, her tone tinged with both perplexity and wariness. Initially, John didn't find this odd. His wife remained unaware of his presence. Upon receiving the news of her water breaking, he hastily boarded the earliest flight home, unbeknownst to her. He imagined that either one of her sisters or maybe her mother was inside, providing support as she welcomed their baby girl into the world. This scenario didn't strike him as unusual at all. While he felt a pang of sadness for not being by her side, he patiently waited outside, filled with anticipation to finally meet the little girl he had eagerly awaited for 9 months. For what seemed like endless hours, he sat in the waiting room, fidgeting with his hands and lost in thought. Unbeknownst to him, the nurse had been observing him closely ever since he arrived. Suddenly, the door leading to the ward swung open, and a nurse emerged pushing a hospital bed. At the sight of his wife holding their newborn baby, tears welled up in his eyes. Yet, his heart sank as he noticed the unexpected figure standing by her side. Residing in Houston, Texas, John Adams embraced his identity as a hopeless romantic. Throughout his upbringing, he nurtured 2 distinct aspirations. Firstly, he longed to find the ideal partner with whom he could build a family. Secondly, he harbored a lifelong dream of enlisting in the military. In his early 20s, when he first encountered Nadine, he found himself irresistibly drawn to the captivating brunette. Their initial meeting took place at a gathering hosted by a mutual acquaintance, and he wasted no time in initiating conversation with her. Nadine appeared flustered yet charmed by his attention. With a mixture of nerves and excitement, he mustered the courage to request her contact information and propose a first date, to which she enthusiastically accepted. Their initial encounter felt like something out of a dream, a seamless blend of charm, connection, and undeniable chemistry. From the moment their paths crossed, John found himself entranced by Nadine's presence. Her inner beauty radiated through every word she spoke, perfectly complementing her outward elegance. It wasn't just her smile that captivated him. It was her kindness, wit, and the genuine warmth that seemed to light up every space she entered. For John, meeting Nadine felt like fate, and he couldn't wait to see where this newfound connection would lead. As their relationship blossomed, John realized that Nadine wasn't just special, she was extraordinary. Barely a month into their courtship, he couldn't suppress his feelings any longer. Summoning his courage, he asked Nadine to be his girlfriend, his heart pounding as he awaited her response. When she smiled and said yes, it was as though the world had tilted in his favor. Their bond deepened over the months that followed, But even the strongest connections aren't immune to mistakes. A year into their relationship, John made a terrible error, one that would haunt him for a long time. The day John decided to propose was filled with equal parts nerves and excitement. Every fiber of his being told him he was making the right choice. Nadine wasn't just his partner, she was his soulmate. He envisioned a lifetime of happiness with her by his side, certain that together they could weather any storm. As he knelt with the ring in hand, the words poured out of him effortlessly, a reflection of his love and commitment. To his relief and joy, Nadine said yes. Though they were both incredibly young, they believed their love was strong enough to stand the test of time. With the unwavering support of their families, the couple began planning their future together. Within months, they exchanged vows in an intimate ceremony, promising to cherish and support each other for the rest of their lives. It felt like the start of a beautiful chapter, one that would bring them closer than ever. The early years of their marriage were nothing short of magical. John often found himself marveling at his good fortune. Each morning he woke up next to Nadine felt like a gift, and each evening they spent together reinforced his gratitude. The first 2 years were filled with laughter, adventure, and countless small moments that reminded John of how deeply he loved his wife. He couldn't imagine a better partner, and he often wondered what he had done to deserve someone as incredible as Nadine. Every shared experience, from quiet nights at home to spontaneous road trips, seemed to deepen their connection. Nadine had an uncanny ability to make even the simplest moments feel extraordinary, and John cherished the way she brought joy into his life. He felt a profound sense of peace, knowing they were building a life together, one filled with mutual respect and unwavering affection. She wasn't just his wife. She was his best friend, confidant, and partner in every sense of the word. But even as they basked in the happiness of those early years, life had a way of testing their bond. John often reflected on the mistake he'd made during their courtship, vowing never to repeat it. He was determined to be the husband Nadine deserved, one who prioritized their love above all else. While their relationship wasn't perfect, they approached challenges with open communication and a shared commitment to grow together. Nadine, for her part, remained steadfast in her love and support for John. She believed in the strength of their relationship, and her faith in their future gave him the confidence to keep striving. They were a team, and that partnership was the cornerstone of their marriage. Together, they celebrated their triumphs and worked through their struggles, never losing sight of the love that had brought them together in the first place. As time went on, their lives began to evolve, but the foundation they had built remained strong. John often thought back to the day he proposed, the certainty he felt in that moment still as strong as ever. Nadine had become more than just his wife. She was his greatest source of inspiration and the reason he believed in the power of love. He knew that the journey they were on would have its ups and downs, but he also knew they were in it together. Through every twist and turn, John's love for Nadine never wavered. Those first 2 years of marriage were a testament to their compatibility and their unwavering belief in each other. As they continued to navigate life's challenges, John held on to the hope that their love would only grow stronger with time, just as it had since the day they met. For years, John had poured every ounce of his energy into his military training. Early mornings, grueling workouts, and sleepless nights had all been driven by a singular dream: to serve his country. His dedication was unwavering. Even when the odds seemed stacked against him, he spent countless nights wishing and hoping for the day his hard work would pay off. Then, unexpectedly, that moment came. The phone rang and everything changed. Nadine watched her husband closely as he took the call. His face was a whirlwind of emotions, anticipation, disbelief, and finally, sheer joy. She couldn't decipher what was happening, her mind racing with possibilities. What could cause such an intense reaction? Before she could ask, John ended the call and turned toward her, his eyes shining with excitement. Without warning, he rushed toward her, scooping her up in his arms. His voice was filled with exhilaration as he shouted, "I'm in! I'm in! They accepted me! I'm going to the military!" Nadine could feel his joy radiating through her as he spun her around. It was the happiest she had seen him in years, and she couldn't help but smile along with him. The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparation for John. He threw himself into getting ready, from updating his gear to studying manuals and refining his routines. It was a busy time, but he relished every moment, feeling closer than ever to fulfilling his lifelong dream. As he immersed himself in his preparations, he noticed something unusual about Nadine. She seemed lighter, more carefree, and undeniably happier. At first, John assumed her happiness stemmed from her pride in his accomplishment. She had always been his biggest supporter, and he knew she was proud of him for achieving something he had worked so hard for. Yet, something felt off. Every time he mentioned the reality of his upcoming deployment, being away for months at a time, her reaction surprised him. She didn't seem sad or even remotely distressed. John couldn't help but feel a pang of confusion. He expected tears or at least a hint of reluctance at the idea of him being gone for so long. Instead, Nadine's demeanor remained cheerful, almost as though the thought of his absence didn't faze her. It wasn't that she was indifferent. She was actively supportive, helping him pack and plan. But her lack of sadness gnawed at him. He began to wonder if he was overthinking things. Perhaps Nadine was simply stronger than he had given her credit for. Maybe she was hiding her emotions to keep him focused on his training. He tried to push his doubts aside, reminding himself that she had always been resilient. Still, a part of him couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about her. As the departure date loomed closer, John started to pay more attention to Nadine's behavior. He noticed her newfound enthusiasm for activities she had once ignored. She took up new hobbies, spent more time with friends, and seemed to be thriving in ways he hadn't seen before. While he was glad to see her happy, a small voice in the back of his mind questioned whether her joy was connected to his impending absence. Nadine, for her part, continued to express her pride in John. She assured him that she was fine and that she was excited for him to chase his dreams. Yet, her unwavering cheerfulness left John with mixed feelings. He wondered if she was bottling up her true emotions or if there was something he wasn't seeing. The contrast between his anticipation and her contentment was both comforting and unsettling. As the day of his departure drew near, John resolved not to dwell on his doubts. He chose to believe in Nadine's love and support, trusting that they would navigate the challenges of military life together. Still, the question lingered in his mind. Was her happiness a reflection of her pride in him, or was it something else entirely? Only time would reveal the answer. The day he left, he noticed the wide smile on her face. He was a tearful mess. He was going to miss waking up beside her every morning. He assumed that she was just excited for some alone time. But as he sat in the airplane, watching the city beneath him, he was completely unaware of his wife's whereabouts. The first few weeks were tough. John worked every day for hours on end. He was in the best shape of his life, and he barely had the time to think about his life at home. But one Thursday evening, he received a call that he never expected. It was Nadine, and she had important news to share. When she told John that she was pregnant with their first child, he cried with joy. John would only be home in 9 months, and he was devastated that he wouldn't be there to experience the wonders of pregnancy with his wife. But as the weeks turned into months, she was sure to keep him involved. With every visit to the gynecologist, she sent her husband photos of the x-rays. She was carrying their first baby daughter, and he couldn't wait to meet her. The months were passing fast, and John couldn't wait for the day he got to fly home and see his wife and daughter. But there was just one issue. John wouldn't be there for the birth of their first child. The due date was 2 weeks before he would return from the military. This bothered John. He knew he had to make a plan, but he wasn't going to tell his wife about his plan. As soon as he received the news that Nadine's water had broken, he took the first flight home. When John showed up at the hospital that night, he expected it to be the best night of his life. For so long, he had been dreaming of this moment. He was finally about to become a father. He walked the long corridors, a smile on his face despite the nervous butterflies in his stomach. But why was he nervous? This was supposed to be one of the happiest days of his life. Before he knew it, he was sitting in the waiting room, excited to see his wife and the little bundle of joy he'd been dreaming about for the last 9 months. Unfortunately, he couldn't be by his wife's side while she gave birth. She had no idea that her husband had decided to fly down for the birth, which was why she'd asked someone else to accompany her in the delivery room. John sat there for hours, nervously playing with his hands and staring into space. He kept wondering if his baby girl had been born yet. But just then, the door to the ward opened, and out came a nurse wheeling a hospital bed. The second his eyes landed on his wife with the baby in her arms, tears sprung to his eyes. But his heart dropped when he saw who was standing beside her. "John!" Nadine gasped, her face turning red as she stared at her husband in utter confusion. "What are you doing here?" She breathed. Pexels, John arose from his seat and stepped toward his wife and child. That's when the man who had accompanied his wife in the delivery room spoke up. "John, it's so nice to see you again," he said casually. The man's name was Simon, and he was one of John's best friends. "What are you doing here?" John asked, his face twisted in confusion. He had no idea what was going on. Nadine came over for dinner tonight, since she can't cook for herself. When her water broke, I offered to drive her to the hospital. She asked me to stay for emotional support, the man said without flinching. John let out a sigh of relief. Simon's story made sense, and he didn't give it a second thought. He nodded, smiling politely. "Thank you so much for helping, man. As soon as I got the news, I got the first plane in," John said, his heart full. He turned to his wife and child, and that was when she placed the baby in his arms. His heart swelled. He loved her the second he saw her. Together, they made their way toward Nadine's hospital room. Simon left, and as soon as he did, Nadine fell asleep. John held on to the baby until the nurse from earlier came into the room. He placed the baby in her crib while the nurse worked on Nadine and the baby's charts. But as he stood beside the nurse, chatting about the days ahead, he noticed something on the chart. His blood ran cold. Something didn't make sense. Nadine and John had always donated blood together, and he knew for a fact that he and Nadine both had type A blood. But when he checked the baby's chart, it said her blood was type B. His eyes widened as he stared at the chart. It wasn't possible. Had the nurses messed something up? They couldn't have a type B child together. John couldn't believe his eyes. As he stared at the chart, his heart sank in disappointment. He was no fool. He knew exactly what this meant. For years, he'd worked himself to the bone for his wife. But now, she had betrayed him in the worst way possible. He wiped the tears from his eyes. What had been happening for all those months while he was gone? He was about to learn the heartbreaking truth. "Can I ask you a question?" He turned to the nurse, tears burning behind his eyes. She looked up at him, a knowing look behind her sorrowful eyes. He took a deep breath and asked the question. "Who did my wife say the man was who was with her earlier?" A thick tension hung in the air as the woman looked up at him sadly. "She told us that he was the father of the child," the nurse said, crushing his heart into smithereens. John couldn't believe his ears. All along, Nadine and Simon had been having an affair. Was that why she was so excited for him to leave for the military? Was it so that she could spend alone time with his best friend? He sat there for hours in a state of shock. But eventually, he knew he had to make a decision, writing a note to his wife. He knew that this would be the hardest thing he'd ever do. When Nadine awoke, he was already long gone. She read his note, which instantly had her calling his phone, begging for him to come back and speak about it. But he wasn't interested. As far as he was concerned, they were already divorced. That day, he threw all of her belongings across his front yard and texted Simon to pick them up. He wanted nothing more to do with her. Eventually, he moved on, but Nadine never stopped regretting her decision. It was a decision that cost her the most amazing man she'd ever met.